Welcome to Girls Who Maths. I'm Libby. You'll meet Alex in the next set of videos. Today I'm going to go through the AQA higher paper from 2019, that's paper 1. In the next set of videos, Alex will go through paper 2 with you. So let's get started. Question 23 now, we've got another simplify question. So it says simplify 8 to the power 4 divided by 32 to the power 2 over 5 and give your answer in the form 2m, where m is an integer. So basically m's a number and it wants to know what that number is. So let's start by getting both our divisions in the correct form. We'll find it much easier to simplify it. So we want 8 to the 4 in the power 2. Well, to get the 8 itself, we do 2 cubed. So 2 times 2 is 4, times that again by 2 is 8. So 8 cubed. But remember, that's times by, that's to the power of 4. Now when we have a power to the power of another power, it's times. It's not add this time, we times the powers. So that side of the equation is 2 to the 12. Now let's look at the next side. 32 over 2 power 5. Okay, well can we take this down to 2? 32. 32 is, well, 8 is 2 cubed. If we times it by 2 again, we get 16, and by 2 again, we get 32. So 2 to the 5. And that is to the power 2/5. So again, we've got a power inside a power, so we times them. And obviously, with times that, we can just cancel out the 5, 2 squared. So we've now got 2 to the 12 divided by 2 to the 2 squared. So remember, we've got a power and a power, and we've got a divide, we just subtract. Give your answer in the form 2m. So our answer is 2 to the power 10, so m in this case is 10. Okay, we're on question 24 now, and fx equals sine over x minus 90. It wants us to circle the value for f of 0. So f of 0 means that the function is 0, so x in this case is 0. So it wants us to know when this, which is, if we cancel out 0, minus 90, it wants to know what the value of this is. So a lot of the common things, sine of 90, all them kind of things, you should know off the top of your head. But if for some reason in the exam you have a big block, you can't remember, try and draw the graph. So try and roughly memorise what each graph looks like. So here I've done the sine graph for you. So we're looking for sine of minus 90. Well, obviously minus 90 means we're going that side to the left of the y-axis. So we'll draw that on. Continue the curve. Now, it does a peak and trough at every 180. So that means that here we're at minus 180. Now, we want to know what it is at minus 90, which is halfway between 0 and 180. And halfway between those 2 points is when it's at its lowest, which, if you know sine, you know that its lowest point is minus 1. Therefore, this must equal minus 1. We look back at our options, minus 1's there. That's our answer. Question 25 now, and it says that P is 4, 8, which is a point on a circle with the centre of 0. The tangent at P intersects the axis at points A and points B. You've seen that on your diagram. And the first part of the question wants us to show that the gradient of the tangent is minus a half. So the gradient of this line from A to B is minus a half. Okay, well, I've drawn a little sneak peek on for you already. But because we have a radius and a tangent, we know that the angle between the two is a right angle, so it's 90 degrees. And what we know is that when we have two lines where they cross at 90 degrees, the gradient of one is the negative reciprocal of the other. So the negative reciprocal is quite a mouthful, but it basically means it's a negative and it's the fraction turned upside down. So say the fraction was a half, you turn that upside down, you get 2. Okay, so let's work out the gradient of this this radius, sorry. So the gradient of a line can be found simply through the change in over the change in x. Change in is just that triangle there. That's what that symbol means. So the change in y in this case, it goes up 8 and it starts at 0. and x, it goes across 4 and it starts at 0 as well. So that's 8 over 4, which equals 2. Now remember, we want the negative reciprocal of 2, which is, imagine it's 2 over 1, we flip it upside down, so we move the top to the bottom and the bottom to the top, so it's a half and it's a minus, so negative reciprocal of 2 minus a half, which is the gradient of the tangent. So part B to question 25 now says, work out the length of AB, give your answer in the form A root 5, where A is an integer. Okay, so we want to know this line, the length of this line. So let's have a look. Well, what is that line? That line, we know from part A that the gradient of that line is minus half. So even if you couldn't work it out yourself, it gave you that answer. So don't give up. Make sure you use the answer in this part and have a good go at this one as well. So we know that. Now, how are we going to work out the intersect? So the intersect in this case is wherever it crosses B. So let's have a look. Well, we know it crosses this point. That is a point we're given. So let's use that in our equation. We would put it in there, and the x value is 4. So y is 8, x is 4. Let's work that out. Well, minus a half times 4 is really just dividing by 2. So that gives us minus 2, 8 plus c. So we move that across, which makes it a plus 2, which makes it c equals 10. Which actually is also point B, because that's the y-intercept. We already know that point, which we're going to use in a second. There's the equation of the line. So we know this point now. We know that this is at 10. So let's work out this point here. And then that can give us the line length. So let's write the equation out. So at this point here, we're across the x-axis, but we're intersecting, which means that y is 0. It's got no height basically, so y is 0. Which means that now, if we rearrange this equation, we move this across, it becomes a plus. And we're now moving that across, which means that x is going to become 20. We're going to times by 2 instead. So we now know point A, we know point B, and remember we've got a right angle triangle here. So the rule for a right angle triangle, if you remember, is the length of the hypotenuse of that triangle is the square root of x squared plus y squared. So we know x is 20, so we know it's the square root of 20 squared plus y, we know, because we know b, 10. So let's work out what's that then. 20 squared is 400, 10 squared 100, that equals root 500. But remember, it wants our answer in the form A root 5. So we need to get this in terms of root 5. Now, remember, if you take out a root 5, you're left with 100, root 100. And 100 square rooted is just 10. So the answer is, in this form, is 10 root 5. Question 26, but very nearly there, second last question. It says the turning point of the graph y equals x plus a squared plus b has an x coordinate of minus 2. 3, 1 is another point on the graph. Work out the y coordinate at the turning point. Okay, so what's important about turning points? Turning point in a graph is when the gradient of the graph, gradient, equals 0. And so the gradient of this graph is going to be this term inside the square. So the square is going to be the gradient, and this point is going to be the intercept of the axis. So if we know that this has to equal 0 at the turning point, this is, and we know the x coordinate at the turning point, we know a straight away. A has to be 2. So that is all based on the fact that it's a turning point and the gradient is 0. So now we know A, we know the equation can now be this. Now, remember it told us another point on the graph, it told us that the graph passes through x is 3 and y is 1. So y is 1, x is 3. Look, it's given us another equation with only one variable, meaning we can solve it. So we get 1 equals, inside the brackets we add, and that equals b. So, oops, that's a plus, sorry. 5 squared, 25, 1 plus b. b. Move the 25 across, you get minus 24. So now we have an even better equation. We've got rid of the two unknown variables. Now we know, remember at the turning point, x is minus 2 and it wants us y at the turning point. So all we need to do, oops, I've missed an equals there. Y equals minus 2 plus 2 minus 24. So remember the turning point, that's 0, so that cancels out, 0 squared 0. So y is minus 24 at the turning point. The last question, we're finally there, and it says angle x is acute. So remember that means it's less than 90 degrees. Cos of x is sine of 60 times tan of 30. Work out the size of angle x. You must show you're working. Okay. This is like the other question that had sine in. You should know these numbers and what they represent on the sine graph. It's not as straightforward as the other one, because the other one was minus 90 and it falls in a nice place. These ones you will just need to learn. So sine of 60, you need to know quite a few of them. I'm sure your teachers will have given you the ones, the most important ones. The sine of 60 we know is root 3 over 2. Tan of 30, we know that that one is root 3 over 3. So now we've got our two variables, we can times them together. So we can do root 3 over 2 times root 3 over 3. Now remember, we times the top together for a fraction, we times the bottom together. Root 3 times root 3, well that's just 3, the square roots cancel out. 2 times 3 is 6, which means a half. So what we have now is cos x equals a half. That's not quite the answer yet, because we want to know what x is. So we need to know what cos minus 1 over half is. Again, this is something that you need to know, that the answer to this is 60. So cos of 60 is a half. So that means that x in this case must be 60. So yeah, you will have to learn a couple of these as well as things like circle theorems. But once you've got them nailed down, you'll find these questions very easy and be able to fly through them. That is the last question for this paper. So if you've enjoyed it, hit like and subscribe, because these will be coming every week or so. Alex will be uploading paper 2 very soon, so keep your eye out for that. And let us know again in the comments or anything if there's any particular topics you want or any particular past papers or specific questions that you're struggling with. Thanks for watching.